Guaranteed you're going to get this conversation later on today when you watch Tim and Friends. So happy to bring in the host of the aptly named Tim and Friends. It is Tim Micallef. Timmy boy, what's going on, buddy?
What's going on, gentlemen?
Not too much. You got to give us a preview of the show. We know this conversation is coming later today. What was your read on Dan Kelly and Michael Bunting?
I don't want to step in the way of Jay's take here, but I have a little bit of a different feel on what happened there. And I completely agree. If it's just a scrum, what I think happened there was Bunting, and you know he's rather verbose. He can talk a little bit. And what I think happened was he took the slash from Sergachev and he was yelling at the officials. And that's why Dan Kelly reacted the way Dan Kelly reacted, because he was almost protecting his ref, but he went way too far. I don't think it was the scrum, him pulling out Bunting and saying, "You're a pain in the ass. We don't want you doing this." I think what he said was, like, if you see the scrum here, he's not even involved. He comes over, gives a little bit, but then he's like, "Did you see the slash?" And he starts yelling about the slash. And that's when I think, like, there's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, because just before the scrum, he was yelling at the refs. And Kelly, as you know, Jay, had a little bit of a history of being a bit of an enforcer when he played in the A. And I think maybe he came over and played official enforcer, which I guarantee you Stephen Walkham does not want any part of. He doesn't want his guys doing that at all. But I think him screaming at the refs before may have mitigated what the response was.
That could be, and I don't want to get mad personally at Dan Kelly. I'm sure he'll be dealt with, but I don't want this to all come down on Dan Kelly. My kind of issue is with, the NHL and the way they're telling them to settle that stuff down so much. I remember feeling that really take a huge change there some years back. But I agree with you. I think he feels like he's playing and got all excited and crowds into it. And he's like, this guy needs to get off the ice. He can't be. And then he just, it's to be honest, if I had that job, I would be in trouble for the same thing. But you got to watch it and you can't set that precedent. And it was a bad look, but I hope it's not coming down too hard on Dan Kelly personally, and they just kind of, hey, let these guys do their thing and stay in the background, is what I hope the message is relayed, and it's not a total personal attack on Dan Kelly, because I can imagine a lot of guys out there would do the same thing.
Yeah, and I'm going to guess that he'll get a quick talking to, say that can't happen again, because you're right. If a guy starts shoving back, we have a completely different story on Tim and Friends and on Leafs Morning Take for sure.
We know that you're going to talk about it today at the very least. Another guy I'm sure going to talk about quite a bit over the next couple of months, Michael Bunting, who was involved in that altercation. At this point, do you think the Leafs have to make it a priority to try and re-sign this guy? Like, I think he means too much to this team, if you can believe it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. He's really bounced back from that shuffle down to the bottom six. And what you saw last night, I watched the pregame media availability. And there was a quote from Bunting in that one, and he just said, "These are the games you wake up for," about this, December game against the Lightning. And obviously, Leafs and Lightning, there's a little bit of history there, but this is the type of player that the Leafs absolutely need to be successful. Someone who will get, and remember, like, he was banged up in that playoff series, and he wasn't his normal self. What you saw last night was Michael Bunting at his best. And I don't want to, make the recency bias draw a direct line from last night's game to you need to re-sign him. But at his best, he is definitely a dude that this team kind of sort of needs. A pain in the ass, a guy that can play on your top line, put up points, and still be a burr. Like, Sergachev throwing that slash at him is nothing, but it's also proof that, Bunting's getting under skin, right? And he got under the skin of the officials that he got so deep. And I think the Leafs need that kind of guy. I don't know what that costs in this modern NHL. I think we can all agree that he benefits from playing who he plays with. So you got to be careful in overvaluing that. But it is definitely a roster piece that I think the Leafs kind of sort of need. And Nylander's another one there, right? Like, you look at those numbers, and as soon as you said re-sign, I wondered if that was going to go Nylander's way. 19 goals. Like, the Leafs are against the cap. They got to re-sign guys. They haven't made it past a round. There is going to be some real tough decisions to be made here.
Go
Yeah,
ahead,
big
Rosie.
time. I worry about this summer, and that's why, I feel like now's the time where they've put this thing together. And, every time they have a test, it seems like they show up more than they have in the past. And I just like how well rounded they are. Last night was a great example. And I agree. Like Michael Bunting, what is this team like? What is this top six like without him? He plugs a very important hole, and he does it very well. And he is the only guy to do certain things out there and does it very well, and then can complement these guys. And like you touched on, Tim, he had that bottom six thing going on. He was bouncing around a little bit. He didn't have the greatest start in the world. And how did he handle it? He handled it perfectly. Like, he's a guy that can go do that and be like, he seems to have his head on straight. He's not freaking out. He's not a drama queen. He's a team guy, team first. I have a feeling his teammates all love him, and he's just a guy that does a really, really valuable job really well. And yeah, he's going to need to be signed. But again, is he going to be looking for, he's a guy that we could lose because he's going to be looking for such outrageous money. It's like, you're not worth that. You got to play with X and Y for the last how many years? It's not going to be like a James Neal situation where you think he's a freaking god. And it's like, he was playing with Crosby and Malkin for 5 years. Like, can we not like put some value in that? So it's tough, and I'm worried about this coming up signing and these guys, because like you say, there's other guys that need to be signed too, and they're already against the cap. So that's kind of why I got my eggs in this season's basket, because I don't think it's going to get any better in the next few.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. And I also think, like, you look around the league and there's a bunch of teams in the same position. We were talking about the Vancouver Canucks, and like, they've got to tear it down and they're against the cap. Like, it's a situation where GMs have to make really hard decisions to be a good team. You saw it in Tampa, right? Like, they had to make really tough decisions on players that they liked because they became too good. And we're seeing it around the league where if you overvalue one or two players, you can put yourself in a real tough spot, and no one's going to bail you out. And that's what Dubas and the Leafs are facing here. And I think a lot of it has to do with what they do in the playoffs. And I think a lot of this will be kicked down the road to see what they do in the playoffs. But Jay, you wanted this team yesterday. I heard you talking, take this game by the scruff of the neck and drag it through. And that's exactly what they did, right? Like, and Bunting was a big part. Like, obviously the goal scorers doing what the goal scorers do, and the talent on this team doing what the talent does. But every once in a while, when you want that game to be grabbed by the scruff of the neck and taken, to the finish line, you need a guy like Bunting. I thought he was a big part of answering exactly what you wanted to see, Jay, in that game.
Totally.
I love that. That's why Timmy's a professional at his best. He does the research and prepares himself accordingly for the show. I wanted to play Armchair GM.
I'm a fan.
I like that. We appreciate that. We're friends right away. Play Armchair GM for us. If you're Kyle Dubas, what are you after between now and March 3rd, the trade deadline?
The immediate answer is kind of funny to me, because I would have said like a big, strong defenseman. And over the last little while, I still think when it matters most, you need somebody beating the shit out of people in front of the net and making you pay to get to tough areas. And I don't know that the Leafs necessarily have that, but I mean, I was just doing the numbers for our show later tonight, and both Murray and Samsonov rank in the top 6 in the NHL in goals against and in save percentage. And if you had told me that the Leafs, I mean, they lost another defenseman last night, Sandin goes down. That's the type of game last night where you would have thought the Leafs of the past would buckle, right? You dominate, you outshoot the opponents severely, but when push comes to shove late, get it down to 2-1, that defense and the goaltending kind of buckles. And that didn't happen last night. And they're not doing it the old-fashioned way. There's no Chris Pronger. There's no Mark Tenorti out there just beating the snot out of someone in front of the net. I can't argue with the results, but in the back of my mind, I still keep thinking, like, last year we were saying the exact same thing about this team and Jack Campbell, right? Like, I mean, we went to the Christmas break and Campbell was like top 1, top 2 in goals against and save percentage, and it changed in the second half of the season. I think in my gut, listen, I want to give them credit. This is a long way to answer the question. I want to give them credit for what they've done thus far with a banged up blue line, and Kyle Dubas absolutely rolling the dice on these two goalies. But my gut tells me they still need someone on the back end that, I don't even care if it's 13 minutes a game, that has guys when they go to the front going, who's behind me here? Who's gonna, if I'm gonna post up and get this greasy goal, get my Corey Perry goal, who's gonna plant a stick in my back in the right spot just below the shoulder pads and the pants? Like who's doing that to me? And I don't know if the Leafs have that right now. So that would be if they were able to add, and it's going to be tough, salary cap, blah blah blah. That's what I would look at.
Rosie, final one to you.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. I like the fact that you give them their due for what they've done so far. But again, it as impressive as this season has been, they've had impressive seasons before, and I just don't think they're going to get their final due and tip of the cap until they get it done. I mean, they've put themselves in that position, right? By putting together pretty good teams, by putting together teams that look like they've got at least enough to get to the second round and not getting it done. So I mean, my host here is Nick Alberga, and he's the consummate fucking prove it to me when it happens kind of guy, and
Yes,
for good reason, right? You follow this outfit for long enough, and there's reason to be frustrated and be skeptical every time they have a good team, but something does feel different about this, and you got to give them their due when their defense they have every reason in the world to be just piled up on the back end and not getting it done, and have every excuse in the book with the injuries they've had, and they continually find ways to get it done. So if they, I agree with everything you said. If they could improve on it, fantastic. It's just so hard to do in this day and age with making deals and getting something done that makes sense for both sides. I don't know if it's going to happen, but hopefully something comes across the table to make this team better. But they're doing really, really well with what they have so far, and I hope that continues. And like you said, it's up in the air because they were looking pretty good this time of year last year, and certainly didn't get her done.
Tim, are you subscribing to Rep? Are you subscribing to the Ryan O'Reilly conversation, the Bo Horvat conversation? We all know Patrick Kane's name is going to be bandied about over the next couple months too.
Yeah. I just don't know how the Leafs do that, without moving a significant piece of their own salary cap wise, or there's something. I mean, we saw Morgan Riley back on the ice. Like, that's $5 million that you can move to add a piece like that. Like, Nick, I'll ask you, who are you moving to make a deal like that? And listen, I love Ryan O'Reilly, and we heard, obviously the Canucks are in a spot where they're moving guys, and now Tyler Myers' name is coming up more often than not. That's still $6 million. Like, how do you fit that into the Leafs cap? I just don't know how they can make a real significant move without someone going down and being, I mean, I guess it's Muzzin's money, right? Like, that's where you're going to try and find that. And if Muzzin is in fact done, then you might be able to put that in there. So I guess you can do it with Muzzin not playing the rest of the year. There are whispers that he might not play again, and that would be shitty for him. But if they can fit it in, I get a Ryan O'Reilly, especially given the depth of this team. I would also get, like, if you can pick up someone somewhere else and put that in there. What about I guess that's too much money. So going to throw Seth Jones' name out there because everyone's talking about the Chicago Blackhawks. Why wouldn't they talk about Seth Jones? Like, are they going to keep him around for this rebuild? I just feel like that's one of those names that hasn't been talked about enough, even though Chicago's saying, hey, Dave Skang, you want him, here he is. I'd take Seth Jones.
The only problem with Jones is that's as close to an untradeable contract as you can find in this league right now. I think what he makes $9.5 per season. He's got $1 billion years left. I just don't know if anybody wants to venture to that level. I think to your point, like, creativity is the name of the game. How often in the NBA do we see 3, 4 team, 5 team trades? Major League Baseball has them sometimes. It's just tougher to do business in the NHL. And I think when you look at the Kane potential of a trade or even a Jonathan Taves, teams are going to have to get creative with Chicago. That means eating 50%, maybe including a third team. I think there are hoops to get through, and I think along those lines, there's got to be a name like Alex Kerfoot who's involved in the conversation, especially if he's not going to play in the top 6. You have enough bottom 6 guys, but we'll leave the conversation at that. I'm looking forward to Tim and Friends today. You know, I'm a baseball guy. I still can't comprehend what the fuck happened with Carlos Correa, so I'm going to tune in because now apparently he's a New York Met. I went to bed last night, I woke up, and now he's a New York Met. What gives?
Yeah, that was the one that had me shaking my head. I think this is terrible for baseball. I honestly think this is absolutely terrible for like if you're a bottom 10 team in Major League Baseball, like you're just collecting the luxury tax and moving on. Like Steve Cohen is paying for your team at this point. You just like if you're an owner, you can't compete with that. You're just going to take the money and run. Like it's ridiculous. And I like baseball should have promotion and relegation. That's where I'm at now. Like I've got a hot take. They need promotion and relegation, and they need to kick teams out for not spending. Because if you're the Kansas City Royals and Steve Cohen's going to pay basically for your salary through luxury tax, love, peace, and hair grease. Give me the money. I'm moving on. Sorry.
I love that. And the best part of this is now they have not one but two all-star shortstops. And then you look at the Jays, they don't have a shortstop. And yes, that's shade at Bo Bichette. We'll leave it at that. Boom. Snap it to me. Oh, yeah. Snap it. Thanks for this, buddy. Appreciate it.
Hey, anytime, boys. Appreciate it. I'm a fan, and I love the real talk.
Thanks,
you.
Tim.
Take care, bud. Guy's the absolute best. Again, I had a chance to go on Tim and Friends a couple years ago, and he was just salt of the earth. Pretty much as advertised on TV or now in person. That's how Tim Micallef is. So very appreciative of his time and his takes, right? Takes are important in this day and age. I did throw some shade there a bit at Bo Bichette. Can't play shortstop defensively, wicked hitter. But that's a story for another day, Rosie.